Hello, everybody, and welcome to Washington Post Story Mode, the show where we break down the biggest video game news of the week every week from now until the end of time or until we stop or whatever. I am Washington Post video game reporter Nathan Grayson, and I'm joined today by an all-star cast of Washington Post reporters. Let's see. We have my usual co-host, Shannon Liao,
Hey
and then we
everyone.
also have sorry about that. We also have two people who have been working very hard to cover, I think, kind of the tech angle of the Buffalo shooting. We have, and okay, so this is actually both of your last names don't look hard to pronounce, and then I think about how to pronounce them, and I'm like, I could easily get this wrong. So, Will, how do you say your last name?
Oremus.
Oremus. Okay, that's what I thought. And Drew, how do you say your last name?
I'm Harwell, but I'm glad you asked Will because I've been meaning to ask too.
Yeah, right.
We've only been working together for like a year, Drew.
Yeah, but when it's all through Slack, you never have to broach these issues. You can just be like, yeah, I know how to spell it. That's good enough. But at any rate, today we are talking about the way that a number of different platforms reacted to the Buffalo shooting, which took place over the weekend, and was obviously a huge tragedy and was terrible. Um, and I think that this is an especially crucial conversation to have at this particular moment because we are kind of having this. I think a lot of different things are happening. One is that I think there was maybe a slight downturn in the number of terrible shootings that occurred when everyone was sort of locked up because of the pandemic. People are returning to kind of a way of life that more resembles what was going on prior to lockdown. And as a result, we're seeing a very upsetting uptick in these things. And the other part is that, platforms have had now a number of chances to kind of figure out what to do in these situations, but we still see some similar patterns repeating. And so, yeah, I guess that's kind of where I wanted to start is like, let's kind of begin by, and, Will and Drew, both of you can kind of do this since I think you've covered it. But kind of a quick breakdown of what happened in this particular case. I know that we had, the stream itself unfolded on Twitch. Twitch managed to kind of zap it about 2 minutes after the gunman opened fire, but it still ended up spreading pretty far. So, like, what happened there?
Yeah, so it starts with this 18-year-old guy, alleged gunman, who drove to a Tops supermarket in Buffalo, not where he lived, but to target Black people specifically. He walked inside the grocery store, killed 10, injured others, and is now facing charges of murder and other things. He had a GoPro mounted on his helmet that streamed the whole footage live to Twitch. He had started the stream, we can tell, about 20 minutes before he got to the store. And you could see him in first person driving the car to the supermarket, parking, getting out with the rifle, and then starting to open fire. Twitch moved fairly remarkably, I think, to drop the stream after 10 minutes of the gunfire erupting. So there have been 20 minutes of effectively, seemingly harmless video where he was just driving, he had the gun. But then when he got out, Twitch pulled it 2 minutes after. But very quickly, people who had been watching that video in real time, we can tell from screenshots that was only a couple dozen people, at least one of them, and maybe more than one of them, had taken that sort of cached video that had gone onto their hard drive and started distributing it more widely. So you had sort of the live stream violence, but also this second phase where the video was saved and publicized across the web.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I guess like to go a little bit further into that, how did that portion of things unfold? Because like at this point, platforms are kind of working in unison to distribute data about any sort of recording of these sorts of things that gets passed around. They all like share hashes and things like that, and so we still ended up having a situation though where, for example, as y'all said in your story, the video managed to be live or managed to stay on like Facebook for 10 hours. And so what was the kind of breakdown there? How did Facebook fail to catch kind of a version of the video that was getting passed around?
Drew, you can correct me if I've got this wrong. So I think Drew got the timeline a little better than I did. But my understanding was after the 2019 Christchurch massacre in New Zealand, which was live streamed directly on Facebook Live. Facebook, companies are always sort of like fighting the last battle, right? Like Facebook decided, all right, we're not going to let that happen again. If somebody starts broadcasting on Facebook Live something, some kind of massacre or horrible violence, we're going to figure out how to shut that down quick. And so they were ready for that. But of course, it wasn't broadcast on Facebook Live. It was broadcast on Twitch, stored somewhere else, re-uploaded to Facebook. And it just seems like their systems, they hadn't planned for that in the same way. And so it stayed up, those links stayed up for hours. I mean, in theory, technically, it should be even easier to ban a link on Facebook than it is to to shut down a live stream or to ban uploads of a video directly to Facebook. But it felt to me like they just weren't prepared for that, Drew.
It was, and I think we can get technical here because I think a lot of the viewers will be sort of technically minded. But yeah, so, they have this global institute of forum of counterterrorism that opened after Christchurch. And the whole thing was based around this one like terror watch database, like you said, where they were hashing. They were saying, okay, these are the videos and photos we don't want to be circulating on the web. Let's add them to this big blacklist database. And then anytime we see those on our website later on down the road, we can automatically block them, which is great for a lot of things. Probably stems the sharing of known, bad material. And this is effectively the system we've been using to shut down child sexual abuse material for 15 years at this point. So it works pretty good, but it's not perfect, and we saw that here because one, it's never going to catch violence in real time, right? It's not like a magical AI that says like, here's a gun, here's a shoot, like, so it's never going to catch that. It can catch some stuff afterward, but it only sort of catches the permutations you've put in the database. So that means if you're trimming the video down, if you're making it longer, if you're adding a watermark, if you've recorded it with the program and that adds a watermark, these are all going to be different sort of mutations of the video. And of course, these are, this is a video that racists are trying to make go viral, right? And so they're using all of their bag of tricks to like, how can we get around the hashing algorithm? How can we sort of like stick it to Facebook and the other websites that are trying to find this video and make it go viral? So that was really interesting. And then, not to mention that Facebook, like Will had mentioned, like there were links to this video on a third party site. In this case, it was Streamable. So if you tried to upload the video to Facebook, it would put back an automatic block. But if you link to that same exact video, thumbnail would be showing up, everything, you're still going to be able to get to it. So it's just like one more click for people. And so, that we saw on Sunday morning, hours after the shooting, there was one post on Facebook that was linking back to the Streamable video that had been up for 10 hours. Thousands of people had been sharing it. Thousands of people had been commenting on it, and Facebook had not responded that quickly. And so it's like, you give them some leeway in responding to some of these things because Facebook's a huge platform, so is Twitch. But like 10 hours, thousands of comments. This is exactly the kind of system they've been saying they want to fight against.
Right. And then this is a problem that's been plaguing tech platforms for years, ever since they've like existed. And one of the questions was like, should it be AI that's doing all this moderation, or should it be humans? I know that Facebook has come under fire before for like its content moderators who are humans, and they have to watch all these videos, and it takes an emotional toll on them. But what do you think like is kind of like the role of humans in that content moderation for when it comes to Facebook and Twitch, and like how much can that help a situation like this?
I'll say, the internet is so big and so chaotic that you effectively need both at this point. Facebook and other companies have pretty much waved the white flag at just doing all human content moderation all the time. And they actually talk this up in their transparency reports now, where they say, like, our systems, our AI proactively caught, 90% of the stuff that we ended up taking down. We kind of have to take their word on it, but that's a whole other conversation. But there's an acknowledgement that like the just fire hose of content that goes onto the platform, not to mention the fact that it's not a fun job, these content moderation jobs. They see the worst of the internet and they see it over and over again. And so, I think there is a place for a good algorithm to take some of the like horrific agony out of this job and maybe make it so we don't see this stuff more. And that's why these hashing databases are important. But again, the AI is not perfect, right? They're gonna, and humans are pretty clever. Like, this is why it's a constant whack-a-mole game. Like the people on 4chan and the like bigots who are trying to make this kind of like terror propaganda go viral, they 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 know how the terms of service work, right? Like they've read about these algorithms. They know ways to get around the system. So it's always going to be kind of this cat and mouse game where the tech companies are chasing after what they've done.
Yeah, I mean the AI systems are fast and cheap relatively, and they're imperfect. So they're going to have an error. They're going to have false positives. They're going to have false negatives, and you can kind of turn the dial to get more false positives and fewer false negatives, or the other way around. But you're always going to have errors. And then humans are expensive and slow compared to the AI, but they have human judgment, right? There are certain things that an AI will get wrong that no functioning human would get wrong. So yeah, I agree with Drew. You need both, and it is awful work. I don't think that can be a reason to not have it done. I think something that I've talked to experts who have been advocating for a long time is that these social media platforms need to recognize that content moderation is core to their business. They've always treated it as something that's like that they can offload to subcontractors and just like take the lowest bidder, and that way their employees don't have to deal with the trauma of it, and they don't have to pay for therapy and all that kind of thing. I mean, they can just kind of out of sight, out of mind. And I think we would see a somewhat different approach if they treated content moderation like it was their core competency. If that's what social media was partly about, was not just building these platforms, letting people use them, but also making sure that the experience is good for users and making sure that they're not contributing to like horrible viral things.
Yeah, there was a good line at the end of your article, both of you here, talking about how content moderation's always been treated as like the afterthought. I don't remember the exact wording, but yeah, it occurs to me both, Twitch, which is owned by Amazon, and Facebook are public, or Meta now, are public companies, and in their risk factors, I wonder if it's listed out that content moderation could become a risk factor for their company, for their businesses, or if that's just something that's not even thought of.
Yeah, the quote was from Emerson Brooking, who said, "No company ever raised money because of how good its content moderation system was." It's like they all know they have to have it, or else they're going to get a lot of bad press. But it's not what wins. It's not what wins in the competitive marketplace, and so it's not what they ever really prioritize.
Right. It's not like it's not a product they can sell. But yeah, I can also speak to this a little bit on the Twitch side of things, because we're about to publish a report on this from like the Twitch side of things in terms of how they handled, the whole moment. And one of the things that's interesting about how they handle content moderation is that they, at least in the way that they talk about it, they recently have been prioritizing the human side of it more than the automation side of things. And so they were saying, like, for example, that in the past couple of years, they've quadrupled the number of people they have on hand to respond to like user reports and other moderation issues. And that in general, with any moderation decision, like any user report, they try to have a person involved. So there's no purely automated decisions made, which is interesting. But then also, like, I think part of the reason for that is that they're a live first platform. And so like it's really hard to like they need to be able to make very granular decisions very quickly. Like a lot of the decisions that they would make in a purely automated way might take down things they shouldn't be taking down. They'd have angry users. And the other part of that's very particular to the situation, and this is one that I got from sources because Twitch doesn't like to talk about this, is they do use machine learning, but they use it only like they use it fairly sparingly. And so like they'll use it for things like, for example, pornography, because it's pretty easy to train machine learning on pornography. There's a ton of it, and it shouldn't be appearing on Twitch anyway. It's unilaterally banned. But while they do also detect for violence, which can explain part of the reason why they were able to catch the shooting so quickly, it's much harder to train in a way that just like immediately smacks it down. Because, and this is the most interesting part to me at least, Twitch is a video game platform, and so there are millions of streams of violent video games and games that are made to like appear as realistic as possible all day long every day. So if you want to talk about like false positives, it is a gold mine for those, unfortunately. So it's a little bit harder for them to do. They do have machine learning in place for that, but it's not quite as foolproof as like porn machine learning. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I find that to be
Super
kind of
interesting.
telling. Yeah, it's interesting and it's telling of the platform and its priorities.
It's a really complicated, yeah. I mean, we have had porn filters on the internet for a long time, right? Like there, you can train a machine to look for like too much skin in a single image, like that might be porn. Like it's definitely not perfect, but but with a video like this and with the Christchurch video, it literally is just like it's an FPS, right? You can't if you're an AI, you can't tell that this is a first person video or something. And also you can't thinking about some of these videos like what is news? What is history? Like how do we define in a, accurate way like what's actually terrible like terrorist propaganda stuff that we want to ban and what is acceptable content in a matter of seconds or minutes. So yeah, all of these are really difficult conversations.
Yeah, no, I saw somebody on like, I think there's somebody on Twitter who replied to like, because I had posted, I just retweeted the whole like New York Attorney General investigation into some of these platforms yesterday. And somebody was like, oh, this is silly. This is just like going after like NBC for broadcasting 9/11. And it's like, well, no, those things are not really directly comparable at all, because one of them was like definitely broadcasting news in a like kind of informed and informational way, and the other one of these things is like a shooter deliberately doing a broadcast of their own where they set the terms of that broadcast. And it's like, in that particular case, it's a blurrier line because, as you said, this is there's still a historical element to it. It's still like, okay, well, what do we do with this bad thing that has happened that we have video footage of? Like, where does that ultimately go in the long run? In the short term, it obviously causes harm, but in the long run, do we suffer harm by not in some way holding on to that and documenting it? And yeah, I don't know, that seems like an incredibly difficult question to figure out.
I'm just also surprised that, well, I guess I don't, I'm neutral on this either way, but I'm just, it was intriguing to me that it even got picked up to begin with, because like having streamed to Twitch myself, having like one or two viewers sometimes, like it is possible for your stream to fall and like have no one notice it at all. But then this one, as you wrote, 22 people saw it live, and then it just blew up from there. That part to me is what's interesting.
Yeah, some of what we were able to piece together about how he even built an audience, some of that was from, he had a private sort of Discord server that he had been inviting people to. He kept like a to-do list of stuff that he would, update. And so you could see like where he would say like, test, my Twitch stream, test if it's going to be published out to Discord. And in his like manifesto slash screed, he was saying like he wanted to stream to Twitch because he thought that you didn't need an account to use it, unlike Facebook, which he said was all like boomers anyway. So you could see like where he was like really, applying this kind of like really dark kind of like strategy to really getting this message out. And he was saying like, I'm going to live stream it because that's my way of getting my cause seen. This is my way of publicizing it. I mean, and this is not a new thing to the internet, right? 30 years ago, people were doing this with TV. Like, what's the biggest spectacle? I mean, and Will has talked about this too, and had people talk about this too, where it's like terrorism is spectacle. It's all about like the shock and awe. How can I get the most attention? And so for this guy who's 18, who said he had been, on 4chan, like reading, racist memes since he was 16, this was what he knew as a way to get people's attention. But yeah, Shannon, like he had not really streamed all that much. He only had one test stream that we could see from like the stream sort of chart data. But this was an indication where he like sent out a big blast to all of his, all the people who he had connected with on Discord and said like, come watch it. It's going to be a big deal. And so he was really trying to use those networks of like hateful trolls on 4chan and other places to like get attention.
Yeah, I mean that's the other hard part too. Is like, so the he definitely used Discord as a place to like at least state his plans, possibly build up an audience too. And like that's one of the links in the chain that I think is maybe most currently befuddling to me is that Discord, like it's very hard to detect a video like this because as you were saying, it's hard to train AI to realize like, oh, this turned from something innocent into a massacre. But like Discord, at least you would theorize, can probably peer into what's going on in their servers and be like, oh, this looks pretty bad. Um, the impression I get from talking to somebody who used to work there is it's like, yes, but it's very hard to find like a tiny 22-person server. But it's one of those things where, like, again, as this happens more and more, like you would figure a company like Discord needs to become more accurate in their ability to find these things because they've touted in the past that they have, really made a concerted effort to remove like extremist servers and stuff like that. But if you're not removing the ones that are going to perform heinous acts of violence, then you're still, you're letting something pretty important slip through.
Yeah, I'm a little conflicted on that because I mean, it seems clear that we don't want big mainstream social media platforms to be a place that takes something like a first-person video of a massacre and just shows it to millions of people. I mean, that's exactly, it's not just that people don't want to see it in their feeds, it's that that's what incentivizes the act in the first place, right? I mean, we know that part of the goal is to get publicity for his like racist screed and everything. So I think that's that's pretty clear cut. Like as much as those platforms can do to prevent that from happening is great. I think it's always hard to disentangle like what aspects of the problem are really specific to our technological environment and which aspects are just sort of like human nature and would have happened, internet or not. But like the ability for people to get on a small private server on a place like Discord and communicate with each other, yes, it's like people will use that to plan heinous acts. I'm not sure that means that we should try to stamp out every corner of the internet where people could communicate privately, or that we should try to have AI reaching into every possible private communication on the internet to make sure nobody's saying, horrible stuff. So I don't think we figured this all out, but I think I always try to keep in mind that like, there are some problems that are social media problems that are problems with like algorithms and amplification and like mass broadcasting of stuff. And then there are some problems that are really more like internet problems, which are just like, as long as the internet exists, there will be people using it to do bad stuff.
Yeah, those are good points. And yeah, for Discord compared to Facebook, I've been on Discord since the beta in 2015 when it was still in a testing phase, and I've also covered like the content moderation there. And they previously, I think when there was like a car that was driven into a crowd in Virginia, this attack, like there were like right-wing groups organizing on Discord, and they told me that they were trying to get rid of them, and that was like a few years ago. And then, but compared to that, on Facebook, everyone has to have their name attached and at least try to prove that they are who they say they are. So I've been in Facebook groups where people will say, "Oh, actually, Facebook, the company, is coming after us for having these like hateful posts on here. So they are actually moderating our private group, and now we're going to have posts taken down." And this is out of my control as a person moderating this group because I'm not the overall admin like of the company. And so like there's a huge contrast between Facebook moderation versus like Discord, where you can just be anonymous. You don't have to like put your name on anything. And I try to interview people on Discord, and they'll just like kind of flee from talking to me because they don't want to give any information about who they are. So it's definitely a big contrast.
Yeah. You also have that question of like, in cases like this where platforms gain that level of granular control and start to crack down in those ways, who do they go after? Because generally speaking, a major company or conglomeration will maintain a status quo. And so in a lot of these cases, also bigger companies might miss somebody who is enacting like white supremacist terrorism because that's sort of, what our country is used to, unfortunately. And then the other part of it is I think that even the platforms that allow you to be a little bit more anonymized, they're kind of all moving in a similar direction, again, for better or worse. I know that Twitch does phone verification now for a lot of chats. I think that Discord also involves phone verification. So you have these platforms that like theoretically you can be kind of anonymous on, but you still need to give increasing amounts of personal information to for like basic functionality. So I think that all of them are kind of taking pages from the same book, even if they're not all at the Facebook stage of you must provide something resembling a real name yet. But yeah, so like
Yeah, and I
I
think, oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I
oh
think
no,
Will
God.
makes a good point too of like, if you stamp out these groups on this one platform, I mean, they would just go look for another platform, and we saw that with, I think just like in the last final years of Trump, when these groups were getting removed from certain platforms and they started to spawn on different like websites like 8kun or like started
Mhm.
using Telegram, and just there's always going to be another messaging app or another news network that would carry their message across.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really tough conversation. Every time there's a shooting like this, we always think like, what did we miss? What could we have done different? Could we have turned the dial, of the AI to be able to see the stuff, or should we have not let people be anonymous? Should we? Um, but it gets really tough because there are times when being anonymous online is good. Like we want, it's not always bad, and not every Discord server is bad. Like it starts to become a privacy conversation of like what are we giving up in these times when we want better security? Do we want AI to be scanning every conversation and getting it wrong sometimes, right? Saying two kids that are talking about a video game are actually potentially shooters. It's a really tough conversation, and yeah, to Shannon's point too, like the bad guys will find some place to communicate, right? They will go to end-to-end encryption. They will do something else. So we will all have to sort of bear the burden of this potentially closer inspection that the bad guys may evade even down the road. But I think it is sort of worth thinking about, like, are is after Christchurch, there was sort of a thinking of like, why shouldn't we be cracking down on 8chan more, right? Well, aren't there domestic places where like white supremacists are just like chatting openly and happy about it, right? And I will say there is a difference between how we have treated those kinds of websites in this country versus how we've treated like ISIS websites. You saw not to go on too much of a tangent, but like there were some big similarities between ISIS websites and something like 4chan after like a racist shooting, right? They were all sharing the same kind of like hateful, bigoted propaganda. They were like celebrating violence. But and with ISIS sites, like the government was like infiltrating them, right? They were taking down hosts. They were doing like counter-terrorist operations to sort of take those sites down, and a lot of them were taken down. But when you start to think about applying that kind of lens to domestic websites, people talking within the U.S., maybe just trolling, right? Maybe just like joking, like it's hard. We don't know when somebody is just joking, exercising their First Amendment, saying hateful things that would otherwise be legal, or when they're sort of actually going to that mode of I'm going to do something terrible in real life. So um, you know, I know the tech companies do think about this. They do realize that this is a tough problem. There are a lot of smart people on here, but it goes back to that question of like, can they be prioritizing? They make enough money. Can they be prioritizing this problem higher so we can maybe not have to deal with this down the road?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
don't think, like, to be clear, I don't think we should just like throw up our hands and say like, well, we can't do anything about this. But I think it's just, I hope that, I think it's great that the New York AG is going to investigate. I was a little disturbed when their statement, Letitia James, appeared to lump together 4chan, 8chan, Twitch, and Discord as quote hateful online forums. I mean, like, all right, like you all have a gaming audience. Like that's a little absurd, right? I mean, Twitch and Discord are not fundamentally hateful forums. 4chan and 8chan, yeah, maybe so. It's great to investigate, but let's hope that they keep some like nuance and perspective on the fact that like these forums serve multiple purposes and multiple audiences. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
absolutely.
great point. Oh, yeah, I was gonna say that's a great point. Well, I saw that statement. I didn't realize that she like lumped all four of the platforms together in the same sentence. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely a weird choice to make, but it's also one of these things where, I mean, again, we have this moment where, so for one, gaming keeps kind of like being tied in with a lot of these things because these shooters and or just extremists choose to use gaming platforms to either discuss what they're going to do or to enact what they're going to do. But for two, it's also a matter of just like, part of the reason for that is that gaming is at a point of mainstream relevance now, but there's still a generation of people that don't really understand video games and still consider them to be this thing of like, toys for kids. And so they see a platform like Twitch or like Discord harboring this and think, oh, that means that it's just like intrinsically bad. It's just like a bad apple. Whereas the actual fact of the matter is just like, no, it's a massive thing that people are using for a million different purposes. And unfortunately, this is one of them. Um, so it's just a matter of like, yeah, people very slowly coming to understand that there's been a shift in the overall status quo where these things are concerned. But yeah, a point that I also wanted to get back to, because I think we were sort of dancing around it a little bit earlier, is like, so we have this situation where we have all these platforms kind of working in a concerted way to avoid this sort of thing in the future. But then we also have, to Shannon's point from earlier, a situation where pretty much no matter what you do, the like quote unquote bad guys will find a new place to go to at least talk amongst themselves, to discuss things, what have you. Even if maybe they can't find quite the audience for it that they could on a big major mainstream platform. Um, and so, like, is there a version of the system that we have currently, like the GIFCT, that can eradicate this problem, or is there always kind of a fatal flaw to it in that people can just go elsewhere, people can share a link on another website, then distribute that link around on various bigger platforms? Like, is there always going to be this break in the chain?
Uh, Possibly, right? I mean, the internet is built to be mass distributed. It's one of its strengths, it's one of its weaknesses. Like, there's always going to be a single serve website that you can use to sort of accomplish this task. I don't think that's a reason to be fatalist, though. I feel like you could do minor to your point that if this video were not circulating on a mainstream platform, that would take away a lot of the oxygen. That would take away a lot of the reason for it existing, right? I mean, if we acknowledge that it's still probably going to circulate on the internet, it's going to be on somebody's hard drive forever because we can't just zap it everywhere with like snap of our fingers. Like, if we acknowledge that, then our goal should be suppressing the distribution of it as much as possible. And
Hmm.
also, from the company standpoint, like, they don't want this on their Facebook is not in this business of sharing stuff like this. They
Hmm.
you know so I think with something like the GIFCT, which is like this tech industry group, there could probably be better communication and maybe more members. Like, if this is something that all of the tech industry agrees on, then maybe they should all be sharing this database. They should all be sort of coordinating amongst themselves. So we don't have the situation where on Sunday, one company was making a decision that the others probably would have agreed to, but they weren't talking about it. And so there was that delay that was allowing the video to be, get more distribution.
Hmm.
Yeah, to me, like an internet that can fully stamp out bad stuff from being shown or discussed is probably not an internet we're going to feel good about overall, right? It's like that's the Chinese internet. Even there, they can't stamp out everything, but a lot.
Yeah, actually, to your point, well, I wanted to talk about this because I used to cover Chinese internet culture, Chinese internet censorship, and like felt like this was a massive tangent, but actually it kind of fits in because if you're thinking about if you were to try your best, like after every instance of extremism or any, going against the government or in China, that it becomes like the like intense censorship. System that you have there, and I think people in China are still very creative, and they'll just invent ways around it. They'll make up like puns and wordplay and like images and like mythical creatures just to get around those censors. And so eventually people still can get their messages across. It's just really hard. Like for instance, I covered this like blockchain incident where they somebody put like a article about vaccines and how they were kind of like damaged and bad for infants in China, and they put that inside the blockchain, and so that the Chinese government could not delete that because it was immutable, or like they just couldn't delete that part of the blockchain. And so afterwards, the government was like, well, in the future, if you want to register your account with the blockchain, with any blockchain company, you have to put your real name, government ID, and I'll find you, basically. So you cannot hide from me in the future. So that was like one way that people got around the censors, and then the government, reacted a couple months later. So it's a constant cat and mouse chase over there. I don't know that you'd want to see that here, but I was going to ask if you thought that any like legal regulators or kind of like scrutiny from Congress would help in a situation like this.
I mean, I think scrutiny is great. I think we should have scrutiny. And my point was just that like we're never going to get all the way there. I think so. I think it's important to think about what the goals actually are. And I think an internet where bad stuff can't be shown or discussed, so it should not be the goal. Because that's also an internet where like there can't be dissent, right? So I think the goal to me, like one reasonable goal would be an internet that doesn't actively incentivize mass shootings, right? And that's what we have right now. Like, how can we get from an internet that motivates somebody like the Buffalo shooter to go out and do something because they know the whole world will see it and it'll be shared widely, to one where like, yeah, bad stuff can happen, but it's not, our technological systems aren't facilitating it and making it easier and making it work in favor of the people doing the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's really difficult though, right? Because I think that the two big things that our present internet kind of is characterized by is one, like centralization, that we have like only a few major platforms that are kind of means by which everybody can sort of talk to each other. And then the other one is shareability. Like shareability and engagement are the two big metrics of anything that goes on any of the major platforms. So it's sort of like, of course, these things are incentivized because it's just like it gets slurped right up into that pipeline as soon as you put a mass shooting or anything else that's just like the people are going to, for lack of a better term, gawk at onto the internet. So that part is very rough. We also have a question in chat that I want to get to because I think it's a pretty interesting one, which is that, and I think that y'all dug into this a little bit, but basically Streamable, which is the platform that everybody used to kind of share that link on Facebook, was also used to archive the approximately 29-second video of the DC shooter in April. And so this person is asking, do you foresee any possibility of getting a platform like that to be more proactive with takedowns?
Yeah, I think you could. And and to note also, Streamable is not they are one of many, right? I mean, they were the ones lucky enough to be chosen by the uploader and the one that we saw, but there it was on other sites too. But yeah, I think, the way you encourage good behavior or responsive reporting is through one, working with the company, and from what we've seen of Streamable, I mean, they were mortified seemingly in their statements to us to be used in this way. They wish they could have caught it in time, certainly before 3 million people had seen it. And it seems like they're going to, at least they have sort of said that they want to redouble their efforts to find this sort of thing. I think the regulation in this space is fairly limited. You could encourage it from that way in terms of like saying if you're going to be hosting this kind of video, allowing that kind of transmission, that you should be sort of investing ever so much in content moderation. But yeah, it's hard. Stamping out dissent is not an easy problem. And to Shannon's point too, like the what Taylor Lorenz called algo speak, like people are creative. People will find ways around the firewalls. You saw that with this video where they were changing it in so many small ways. You could even see that in the 4chan conversation of people saying, like, actually telling other anons on 4chan, like, this is how you save it. This is what you should do to change the video file so people can't find it. So there's not going to be any clean rule. There's no like quick switch that you can flip to like nuke all of this stuff very quickly. And again, like the people who are trying to make this spread in a bad way are knowledgeable of this stuff too. Like you see on 4chan and like white supremacist forums when they're talking about violence, like one of the things they'll say is like, I want to kill that person in Minecraft.
Yeah.
And they say in Minecraft because it's like, oh, well, they can't censor us because we're talking about it in a video game. And so it's like just a common joke that everybody sort of says it. And it's like kind of haha because it's like we're smarter than them. But it's also like it just reflects the fact that like people are thinking about this, thinking around the ways to get around this censorship. So yeah, I think encouraging companies like Streamable, even the small ones who maybe don't have the gazillions to spend on content moderation, to take these problems seriously, right? Like they should be innovating in content moderation as much as they're innovating in advertising and every other business line that they're doing, because it does matter for not just their product and how they seem to, and their bad press and how they seem to other, buyers, but also just in the public square, like ethically, like maybe companies should be investing in this.
Mm-hmm. Mean, do you think that this particular instance, this shooting, the Buffalo shooting, could serve as a wake up call on that front, or is it just another drop in this larger bucket of violence being perpetrated on major platforms and companies being like, well, look, we incrementally improved, we did a little bit better than last time? Do you think that there could be a major shift now in how companies approach this, or is it just going to be more of the status quo of like, well, we're trying at least?
It's so hard, we don't have crystal balls for this. It's easy to be fatalist.
Mhm.
You know, I think I'm encouraged by seeing, the New York AG mention these companies. I'm sort of discouraged by like the broad brush of like suggesting all the companies have the same problem. And, I think it's easy because we're tech reporters to just focus on the tech angle, but let's also remember that like Twitch and Discord are used by a lot of people who don't shoot up grocery stores, right? They're used all around the world, and yet guns are a specific problem here in the US. Like this guy had a gun, the gun was what killed people. So let's not lose sight of that. So, after the Christchurch shooting, it felt like nothing can be fixed. The internet is broken. And there were some actual good reforms that were passed. And, the the tech sort of collaboration after that, and the government collaboration on that too. I mean, New Zealand really, there were lots of governments around the world teaming up. I think there are reasons to be hopeful, but it's we have so many shootings in this country that nothing happens afterward. It's easy to sort of like sink into despair around it too. But I'm hopeful for sort of better outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And,
for additional context, just like there were 3 shootings around that time frame on that weekend. One of them is the Buffalo shooting, and it has this like tech angle attached to it. But the other 2, I don't necessarily think they do, and they all happen around the same weekend. So
mhm. Yeah, I also wanted to quickly ask Will because um, I like the idea of an internet that doesn't incentivize these things. Um, and so I was just wondering, is there anything that you've seen, any developments, even outside of major platforms, that suggest people are working on something that shifts kind of in that direction, or like ideas for platforms that are not so tied to, I think, the current way that we envision them?
Yeah, I mean it's a tough problem because like it's interesting that we talk about centralization, and there has been a lot of centralization in tech, but I think maybe a better word is concentration, because this story of how the Buffalo shooting video got out is reliant on the fact that there is no one central content moderator, right? Like if it had just been Twitch or just been Facebook, they probably could have kept it from getting out, right? They probably could have kept people from seeing it for the most part. It's the fact that there were these other platforms like Streamable out there. Streamable, Drew tried to reach Streamable on Saturday night after the shooting to be like, hey, y'all still have this video up, what's going on, and got back an auto respond that was like, sorry, we're not reachable on the weekends, we work Monday through Friday. This is a small outfit, and they don't take content moderation as part of their value proposition. I mean, I really think a lot of it comes back to that. Like you can start up a video platform. You're like, oh, I'll get rich hosting people's stuff, and people don't think about like what's the downside for society. That's not priced in any way. And if you did try to build in content moderation from the start, would you even get off the ground? Would you even make enough money in the first place? Like if your first 4 employees had to be content moderators, how would you ever get your business going? I mean, there's a structural economic problem there that's hard to overcome. But again, I don't think it means, I agree with you. I mean, it never be fatalist. Like that doesn't mean there isn't progress possible. We've seen platforms growing up in recent years that are an explicit reaction to or rebellion against the dominant modes. Like, Snapchat is largely a reaction to Facebook, where like everything you did in your life became part of your permanent record, and Snapchat tried to build something different where things can be more private and ephemeral. Like, I'm on the little app Be Real, where like you have to snap one photo of yourself a day, and it has to be like within a 2-minute window, so it can't be posed and staged. Like, that's obviously a reaction to Instagram and how curated our lives are getting. People are creative, and I think there will be more platforms, maybe in the future that are built with an eye toward not being the kind of place where a mass shooter can go on and get their message out to everybody, or all the other ills we've seen from the dominant platforms today.
Yeah, like as well as talking, I mean, I think about the origin stories of Facebook and Twitch and Discord. It was especially for like Twitch and Discord, it's like groups of people wanting to get together and find a way to game and talk and have a nice. Well, for Twitch, it's like to have a nice like show and have entertaining show. And then for Facebook, it was to like look at photos of people in college and like pick if they were hot or not. So it's like these very uh, uh, like siloed out origin stories, right? Very different from any kind of thought about content moderation.
Yeah. Wow. I think the idea of, again, platforms that kind of go against the current grain is a good note to sort of wrap things up on. Um, do y'all have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share on this topic or just in general?
I, I mean, might sound cheesy, but like I've been just like intellectualizing all this and talking about the tech angle, but I guess my closing thought is that this was an awful, horrible incident that makes me like choke up when I think about it too much, and I just really feel for everybody who was affected by it.
Yeah, I agree with Will. Like, we have to be thinking about the victims and their families here. Like, we don't want to focus too much on this shooter. I don't even want to name him. Like, we don't want to encourage that kind of behavior. But these are real people's lives, and the tech is just one backdrop from which we can like look at this issue. So, but yeah, thank you for having us on.
Yeah, of course. It was great
Yeah,
having you on.
yeah, thanks for coming on. And yeah, I think the way that we're talking about content moderation is the way that we're thinking about how could a shooting like this be prevented in the future. I mean, like looking at the first paragraph of your story and just like that itself is heartbreaking to read. So yeah, like thank you for covering it and coming on the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. Bye. All right. We the show is not over. It will continue because we are going to dive into some other stories from this week. That's weird. But yeah, we're going to dive into some other stories that happened this week, as we always do every time that we do this show. So let's see. Let's dive into some things that have happened recently. This is one I think, Shannon, you are pretty familiar with at this point.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I mean, this is like tonally different from what we were talking about just now, right? That was
yeah.
very emotional and hard. But now we can talk about this, which is also uh controversial.
Yeah, to say the least. So the short version of this story is that Activision Blizzard announced that they have been working on this tool called the Diversity Space Tool. And the idea is that they've basically found a way to internally quantify diversity across a number of different kind of metrics, a number of different characteristics that they then assign numbers to individually that adds up to a certain kind of diversity score. Blizzard,
Mhm.
Activision Blizzard, when they published a thing about this, was very proud of it. It immediately received severe blowback.
Yeah. So like people I talked to around the company were like, "Oh, I didn't know we were going to release this tool. This also took us by surprise. Not a good look for us once
Hmm.
again." So, yeah, and I also appreciate that you brought up this article because it has some nice reporting about, like the origin of the tool and where does
Yep.
it come from, which is like mind-boggling to think about. Like, you take the source material of like, and Sarkeesian's like resources and then turn that into a, I don't know, almost looks like Dungeons and Dragons dice with different
Hmm.
quadrants. I don't, and then try to quantify diversity, which is I have not seen people I have not seen anyone else try this before. I'm sure there are other
Right.
companies that have not leaked their tools like this, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something. I mean, just looking at like this weird kind of setup, it's like age, ability, body type, gender. I think one of the things that Austin Walker, formerly of Vice, singled out is that there's a score for like cognition or cognitive ability, and like already just giving that a numerical score is super weird. And so like for Anna from Overwatch, who is a woman of color, they had it set to like 0, and
Uh-huh.
people were like, what are you trying to say here? But I
I,
guess like the cognitive ability score really refers to neurodivergence. So the idea is just that she's neurotypical, but it's like none of that is conveyed up front in this sort of data set. It's just like, yeah, it is a very
I,
strange way to do this.
I'm just looking at like Lucio, like ranking for ethnicity, ranking at 2. Why not like
Right.
3? Like, how do you determine who is the most diverse ethnicity versus like what's not? I mean, like Lucio's also probably a person of color. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't really, yeah. So like most of this, it's just like people just kept dunking on it all throughout the week, and there's like limitless dunks for it because it's just so strange.
Yeah. When it also just seems like an instance of like left hand and right hand really not meeting in the middle, because like they initially, in the post that Blizzard or Activision Blizzard published about it, they were like, yeah, our developers have been using it and like they've been very satisfied and happy with it. And then all these like developers on games like Call of Duty and Overwatch were like, we've never heard of this. We have not heard of this. We haven't used it to inform the creation of any of our characters that are currently in our games. Like this is bizarre to us too. So it's
Yeah,
just like, yeah.
yeah, I think that speaks to how King was acquired by Activision Blizzard and it still functions as its own independent studio, so they're not like really talking to anyone else as much. But it is interesting how they like decided to publish this to be front facing, thinking it would look good, and then have everyone else around the company dunk on it. It's just like a very interesting series of events for a company that actually has so many lawsuits, investigations, and just bad press for so long, for so many months, just to
Hmm.
continue to post another L.
Yeah. Rough times for Activision Blizzard. And also just like, I don't know, indicative of what an engineering first mindset gets you when it comes to things like this. Because, as I think a lot of people in the games industry online pointed out, the best way to really resolve issues pertaining to diversity is just to get more people in the room who are of diverse backgrounds. Like,
Mhm.
you know, that I think it's interesting because a moment ago we were talking about issues pertaining to content moderation and the fact that like at scale you just need a mixture of automation and human beings to really resolve some of the more pernicious issues that dilemma presents. But I mean, in this case, the scale is totally different, and ultimately what you need is just more people, more human beings who can like make judgment calls on thornier issues, because like you can't take apart a person into a series of numbers and scores in this way, especially not in an objective way, because these scores are wholly subjective and they always will be. So
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting because games are supposed to be an art form, and then like hypothetically you would pitch a character that you think represents your culture, and then you would like then make the game more diverse that way rather than quantify everyone with a score and say I need
mhm.
this game to be scoring a 3 in diversity. So that's just like put some more characters in the random number generator and see what we get. It's just like a very strange approach.
Yeah, I will say. Speaking of companies kind of grappling with these sorts of issues pertaining to not only kind of diversity within games, but also amongst their employees, the saga of kind of how the games industry is reacting to Roe versus Wade continues. I published a story this week based on an email sent out to Insomniac employees. Insomniac is the company that makes games like Ratchet and Clank and Spider Man, and basically, in the in the wake of the news that Roe versus Wade will likely be repealed, people at Insomniac wanted to make some kind of a statement around it, and obviously work toward various solutions to problems like employees in states that are set to not allow abortion. Like what does the company do about that? Um, so Insomniac tried to make a statement, basically got shut down by Sony, and then the whole thing with like it's been a whole saga, but the short version is that PlayStation president Jim Ryan sent out an email to employees asking people at Sony to respect differences of opinion around abortion rights, as in he did not take a side necessarily. He was just like, everyone should get along about this. And then he spent the remainder of his email talking about his cats and their birthdays, which was
Yeah.
not well received.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Actually, when he sent out that email, people were horrified, and then they started talking to each other, and then one of them talked to me and was like, "Quickly, we need to. This is just outrageous. So I need to tell you about this."
yeah. Oh, that's really funny. Eugene Kim in chat was like, on the flip side, thoughts on Bungie's approach to diversity in the muzzle comment. That is where we're at now. Good trend. Good job having the same idea for a transition as me. But anyway, so what ended up happening is that the CEO of Insomniac, Ted Price, and other people at Insomniac basically convinced Sony to match their donation to a reproductive rights organization called the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project for $50,000. And so the Ted Price announced this to the company. That part was obviously well received. The thing that raised some eyebrows is that Sony was like, well, if so, for one, Insomniac cannot make a statement about this, and either about the donation itself or about reproductive rights in general, nor can any of our other studios. And if employees want to tweet about this donation that we're making, they can't directly or explicitly mention Sony or Insomniac. They can retweet what the WRRAP says, but they can't be like, yeah, Insomniac did this, or yeah, Sony did this. This is so it was this weird kind of like, you know, meeting everybody halfway sort of thing. And I
Yeah,
think that it was an odd solution to the problem.
yeah. Well, I ended up speaking to somebody who does consulting for these gaming companies on like how to respond to situations and like look politically correct and not experience political gaffes like this.
Hmm.
And it's like one of the reasons why all this when we did the Roe versus Wade, like gaming companies responding to abortion rights issue, and many gaming companies did not respond. And the reason for that is because they were trying to avoid wading into this controversy where abortion rights in America are still a controversial issue, where there are people who
Hmm.
find it like because of their religious faith or whatever to that they don't want abortion rights, and
Mhm.
so for a company like Sony to then make us take a stance either way would hurt their profits, right? It would hurt their relationship with those people who
Mhm.
believe that abortion is wrong. So then Jim Ryan, in his email, it's very long-winded about his cats and birthdays, is trying to say, respect people's opinions.
Yeah.
Please don't offend those people.
Yeah. I am curious, the person that you talked to, did you kind of like ask them directly about why, like, you know, reproductive rights was obviously a no-go zone for a lot of these companies, but they were okay commenting on Black Lives Matter in the wake of George Floyd, or,
Yeah.
stopping Asian hate? Like, why? Because those, to an extent, unfortunately, are also controversial, statements to make.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, Black Lives Matter has been around before George Floyd. Like in
Mhm.
2014, there was like also a Black Lives Matter movement and a bunch of protests. And back then, companies did not speak out. And only
Mhm.
like recently, only in 2020, did all these companies across tech, gaming, and other businesses come out with statements saying they also support Black Lives Matter. And that's
Mhm.
because that like people have theories about this is because in the pandemic people had less things to do. There's the video circulating of George Floyd being, like passing away, and then that video was so it just like provoked such a strong reaction among people, and then the stance of like, oh, murder is wrong is not controversial
Yeah.
when you have a video like that, and also same thing with like Stop Asian Hate, because there was the Atlanta shooting last year in March, and that killed more than 10 women, Asian
Mhm.
women, and that was also shocking for people. So like it's not hard to say that that seems wrong.
Mhm.
Whereas abortion rights, it just becomes again this like religious faith issue, according to the person I talked to.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think the other side of this particular story, and to sort of get back to the question about Bungie, is that yeah, so you also have this instance here where like it seems like company studios within Sony are sort of trying to figure out how to behave around Sony. Um, And so you had this like very, in my opinion, telling statement from Price that was part of this larger email where, you know, there was an employee who asked like, well, what if we decided to make a statement anyway? And Price's response was there would be material repercussions for us as a wholly owned subsidiary. Among other things, any progress that we might make in helping change Sony Interactive Entertainment, change their approach would be stopped dead in its tracks. We'd also probably be severely restricted from doing important public facing work in the future. So I mean, like that makes it sound like, you know, if a subsidiary at Sony steps out of line, like you are in big trouble, which makes Bungie's comment, because Bungie went on in the wake of this piece that I published, their comms person went on to say like, I admit I'm just a community manager in the grand scheme of things, but I'm confident in the following: we are and will continue to be Bungie. There will never be a muzzle big enough to stop us from standing up from standing up for what's right. So that makes that statement, you know, pack at least a little bit more punch. Now, obviously, again, a comms person can't guarantee that. I mean, I think that, you know, there's been talk in the past of how comms people at Bungie are pretty empowered to say what they want to. But you know, once Sony fully absorbs Bungie, like, will that remain the case? We'll see. But it does seem like, in general, you know, there's this feeling from at least this company that Sony has absorbed of like, hey, we are being changed. There's another employee question, where yeah, someone literally said like, hey, is this now impacting our freedom of speech and our values?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that's super interesting. I didn't see that person's tweet before you posted it. But I
mm,
do know that, you know, Bungie was like maybe the only gaming company or like the biggest one to speak up after the Buffalo shooting and come out with a statement against I believe white supremacy.
mhm.
So that is like, you know, again, they're leading the charge on commenting on things. So it remains to be seen what happens next.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely going to be, um, I think, an interesting integration process for Bungie. I mean, I think it could go any number of ways. I think that for now, because Bungie is, uh, I doubt that Sony will try to stop them too much initially, because Bungie has such a clearly delineated personality in the eyes of many people who follow video games. But I think, as with anything, what you end up seeing with a lot of these companies that get purchased is a slow change over time as they become more and more integrated with a bigger company. And as like people leave, there's churn, you know, over time is when change like this happens. It's not overnight.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. In any case, let's see. Oh man, yes, I have a great transition. I love it when this happens. Speaking of overnight, we have a new overnight sensation on our hands in the world of games. Because there is this new vampire survival game that just came out this week that I'd never heard of before this point, that is now like the big Twitch and Steam game. It's called V Rising. Have you heard about this at all?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I only just started paying attention to it like yesterday.
You should
Um,
have brought it up in the team meeting. Then I would have known.
yeah, but here's the thing. I didn't even know about it during the team meeting.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, so basically it's like Vampire Valheim, which they should have just called it that. That'd be a way better name.
And not get sued, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, nobody sues anybody anymore. That's so last year. But yeah, it's basically a game where, like, you know, you build and survive and hunt and craft and like build up your kind of like kit and gear and abilities over time. And you can build what you want to, like in Valheim. The difference to me appears to be that like the combat actually looks good.
Hmm.
As you can see, it kind of has this like top-down perspective. Here, let's go to the Steam page really fast. Theorizing Steam. It looks kind of like the combat looks kind of Diablo-y, or almost like even Lost Ark-ish.
I mean, maybe the guy with the outfit has a Lost Ark vibe, but
Become a vampire. I would love to be a vampire. Would you like to be a vampire?
is this multiplayer?
Yep.
Okay, well, maybe.
Yeah, here, we can get some music going, get some good vampire tunes. Yeah, so see, it has kind of the Diablo-y perspective, but then it's
Is
like
it,
surviving and crafting and vampiring.
do you know if it's free to play or like you have to pay?
I think it may cost money. Wow, that is a weird place to stab a bear.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like, how can I get my friends to play with me if it's free to play? It's so much easier.
Yeah, I think it might be. No, I think it maybe costs money. Here, we can check in 2 seconds.
Yeah, yeah.
First. But yeah, so see, you have like cool vampire abilities and stuff, which makes it to me like it. any video of it pops a little bit more than Valheim did. Valheim was amazing, and I loved it, and I put a lot of hours into it. But I mean, it did kind of have this like clunky sort of look to it and look and feel.
Yeah, it does have like a ARPG MMO look. So
Yeah, which also gives it good timing because like Lost Ark is still really big on Twitch and Steam right now. And I think like if people are starting to get bored of that, it's like, well, here's your next game. It's a mixture of like that kind of combat and Valheim, which everybody loved.
I actually do have an article about Lost Ark coming out soon, but it's people, people who are playing it, they are heavily invested. They're not bored, but people who are bored, oh, they've quit already. So
Yeah. Yeah, so it's $20 right now.
okay,
So,
that's not too bad, but still can't talk everyone into it.
yeah. But yeah, right now, let's see. As we just saw a second ago, it has almost 80K concurrence on Twitch right now. I think it's probably doing similar on Steam. So anyway, big new game. It's the one that people are going to be talking about very soon, as soon as everybody notices that it's the big new game, which usually takes a few days. I don't know if anybody who is in chat has been playing it. If so, let us know what you think about it. I'm looking forward to trying it. It seems cool. In the meantime, let's see what else is going on. What can I transition to easily?
It doesn't matter. Just rudely transition. Actually, just rudely interrupt yourself with another story that has no segue. Just go for it.
All right. Speaking of video games. Oh wait, no, I got this. Speaking of Twitch. So the Twitch gambling meta is back again. I think that this like recurring theme of the gambling meta leaving and coming back has been going on since like 2018 or 2017. But yeah, basically, XQC has started doing sponsored gambling streams again, and so it's gotten everybody talking about the fact that hey, there's still pretty rampant gambling on Twitch with a lot of fairly sketchy companies involved by way of sponsorships. And so you have the usual refrain of XQC defending himself, others like Asmongold actually defending him. And then other streamers like Ludwig, who's no longer on Twitch, but used to be talking about how he personally used to have a gambling addiction. And so his take is like, yeah, we probably shouldn't be, doing this on a platform viewed by millions, many of whom are younger. That just seems like it might lead to bad consequences. And then go ahead.
This reminds me of completely unrelated, but I think a link that you should have included here, if possible, is Hearthstone, like and loot boxes. There's another loot box lawsuit. And speaking of reoccurring themes across games journalism, there's another one, of like gambling again, or not gambling, depending on your perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is always the thing, right? Is that like if you really want to look at like a lot of video game mechanics, they have a lot in common with gambling. I mean, loot boxes are one of them. And like a big overlap here is like people will do these gambling streams and like the appeal of them is to watch somebody spend a lot of real money in order to like hopefully win back enough to justify it. Similarly, like with games like Genshin Impact, for example, you have like a functionally a loot box system and people will do streams where they do quote unquote pools where they will spend a ton of real money to get a bunch of functional, like basically booster packs in hopes of getting really rare stuff, which has a lot of, which is high value. I mean, it is like, mechanically speaking, it's the same as a gambling stream. It just has the artifice of a video game attached to it. So yeah, I mean, like, I think that's also probably part of the reason why Twitch doesn't necessarily like act to take these things down, because it's like, the line between what a lot of video games do and what gambling does is like pretty blurry, for better or worse.
Yeah, I'm with the lawsuits. I'm with like the scrutiny, because this has been like a pretty big theme in like mainstream media, even, and like also like I think there's like regulatory scrutiny on this, so it could change over time. I definitely think that gambling streams on Twitch might take a little longer for people to notice, but yeah, definitely subject to change over time, just like everything else we were talking about content moderation earlier today.
Yeah. And the other side of it, the kind of middle stance that I think is worth paying attention to is Mizkif talked about this. And like his overall stance is that he would prefer there wasn't gambling on Twitch. He thinks it like cheapens the platform. But he's like, but what it shows is that everybody has a price. That like, somebody like XQC, even though he comes across as this like gamer gremlin goblin guy who like, just is like very authentic and, speaks his mind and whatever. He's still somebody who's in this to make money. And like, despite the presentation of being a normal, down to earth dude, he like, you know, if somebody comes up to him and says, "Hey, I'll give you $1 million if you do this," he's like, "Yeah, okay."
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think we all knew that about everyone who's who's on a platform to make money.
yeah,
They want to make money. That's not a surprise. But yeah.
yeah, it's not. But I think that a lot of people lose sight of it when they're watching somebody day in and day out, and they feel like they know them and they're their like best friend or whatever. I think it does bear repeating because it's something that not enough people have internalized.
Mm-hmm. You can,
Um,
by the way, rudely interrupt yourself again for the next
oh man,
story.
no, I have to sit here and instead like just create a lot of dead air while trying to come up um with
I,
transitions.
I really
Oh wait,
don't
I have this
think.
really good new one. I haven't tried it yet. Speaking of Twitch.
Oh God. I should
Yeah,
really send you links in the future so that it's not just your beat. I should just send you Activision Blizzard links,
don't worry,
10 of
there's
them.
gonna be more stuff. I just wanted to
Okay.
get through this because it's all interrelated, and also because we talked about Twitch earlier in regard to the Buffalo shooting, so it makes sense to have some Twitch stuff on here today. Anyway,
Uh-huh.
just a very quick update to a story that I worked on earlier this year. Basically, there was a bunch of fraud on Twitch late last year, and authorities in Turkey ended up investigating because it was a big scheme that was mostly carried out in Turkey involving streamers basically like transferring money, illicit money from like stolen credit cards and stuff by way of Twitch bits and donations and stuff like that. So the update to that is that people have been directly arrested as a
Mm,
result of that in Turkey this week.
mhm.
18 people were arrested, and like this is an actual picture from it. You know, armed authorities showed up at people's doors and took them out of their homes, which is imposing. But I guess you know if you do the Twitch crime, you do no Twitch time because you're going to be in jail and you can't use Twitch anymore. Um,
Wow. It's a sad joke for a sad situation.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
and an elegant joke as well. Anyway, let's see. Moving on to our last couple of stories of the week. One of the big things that a lot of people have been talking about is that it seems like Konami is set to remake Silent Hill 2,
Hmm.
a beloved horror game that introduced us to all sorts of things. I don't remember if that was the first one with Pyramid Head or not, but anyway, beloved video game iconography. And then also just the game itself was really good and really scary. But in the time since that game came out, a lot has happened at Konami. It's gotten a pretty bad reputation in terms of making games. It parted ways with Hideo Kojima, basically just did a bunch of things that people don't approve of, and now it's going to revive a series that people love, but with new developers. So seemingly, one of the developers it's going to work with is another horror game developer called Bloober Team. They have a very strange name, but they've worked on a number of horror games that have been kind of middlingly received. I think the most recent one was like The Medium, which was a next gen
Oh,
horror game. Yeah.
I only saw Gene tweeting about the medium and how much he hates it. That's all.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because I think the issue that a lot of people are having is that like Bloober Team seems to, in the eyes of many, like fundamentally misunderstand what makes video game horror like fun and cool. And so they're like, oh, this is the worst possible pairing for Silent Hill. And so people have just been losing their minds about this all week. And like it seems likely that this is going to happen. It seems like one of those rumors where enough people who usually know the stuff are corroborating it that it's like, okay, well, here we go.
Yeah, yeah. Horror games are not for me, but I have a friend who plays all of them for me, so
Mhm.
I'll just like watch. I'll probably watch over someone's shoulder as they play through the
Yeah.
whole game. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, on the upside of things, potentially, um, you know, if again, my running bet here, my guess is that the next Hideo Kojima game will be a horror game. I think that now that he's gotten Death Stranding out of his system, which had some horror elements,
Right.
that you know, after PT and Silent Hills, which was going to be his project before Konami unceremoniously gave him the boot, after those sort of got canned, it wouldn't surprise me if he decided to do a spiritual successor to
Mhm.
Silent Hills or to his idea for Silent Hills. So, you know, maybe Konami's going to be like, here's our Silent Hill game. And then at Summer Games Fest or whatever, Kojima will be like, too bad. I'm making the real one.
Mhm. Okay, if he like attaches his name to it, I'm sure that would like make it a lot more interesting and worth playing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, he's not going to attach his name to this. There's no way he's working with Konami on this. That breakup was way too acrimonious. Um, But no, I mean he will make his own horror game that is probably in the vein of this sort of thing. But yeah, we'll see. That's just a guess on my part. It's just a guess that I'm going to keep restating because I think I'm right. I just feel like this is going to happen.
You should do a bingo card. We'll revisit it in a couple months and see if you won.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that functionally we did do this at the start of the year. We did that predictions episode, and I want to point out right now, for all the world to see, that so many of my predictions were right. That you and like what was it, Mikhail, were being like, oh, I don't know if they're going to delay like Breath of the Wild 2 or like Starfield.
Okay,
Like those
okay,
seem like
okay.
they're on the calendar pretty well. Both got delayed.
Can I just say I watch a lot of
Called it.
I watch a lot of Vogue and Vanity Fair videos on YouTube,
Uh-huh.
and then they have some where they interview celebrities and they kind of revisit their previous interview, and they
Uh-huh.
have them and they freeze frame what they previously said, and then they have them on the other side, on like left or right, being like, "Oh, I was right or wrong." So you should just do
Mm,
that. You should just like contact
mm.
John, our video producer, and like do a video of your predictions video, freeze frame, and then you currently saying, "I was right," or "I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I was wrong, world. I continue to be wrong."
Oh no, I mean, I would never. You can do that one. You can do the wrong one since you were wrong. But yeah, John, we should definitely get on that. I think that could get a lot of views and could really just like take our channel to the next level. It's just a video of me, kind of like a little. I think should be like a little smaller version of me dancing in front of a larger version of me, being like, "I was right. I was right."
I don't
Yeah.
we should go back. So I'm saying you should do this video to find out if you were right. I remain skeptical that I was wrong. So
Wow. Okay. Well, that is a shame because I remember this quite well. But I guess we can go check. In the meantime, let's jump over to another game that is being kind of middlingly received, albeit for very different reasons. So this week, people got to play Multiversus, which is the new WB fighting game that mashes up a whole bunch of WB properties. Here, for example, you see pictured together Superman and the Iron Giant.
okay, real
Um,
quick, John says my video idea, instant 500,000 views. I agree. Thanks.
there
Thanks,
we go.
John.
Yeah, I knew it. I mean, yeah, I think it would definitely do really well because people just like to see me be right because they're just like so used to it that it's comforting. Um,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
anyway, so Multiverses, people got to play it this week, and apparently the game is fun. I've heard pretty much entirely positive reactions to like the actual way it feels. It's like a good, kind of Smash Brothers clone type of thing.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
really sad that I missed playing it. I got
mm,
invited many times to play it, and like I used to work for CNN, which is owned by which used to be owned by Warner Media, which is then owned like, included Warner Bros. And like Warner
mm,
Games. So I was like, oh, cool, it'd be like something familiar, but I just didn't have time. But it looked really good. Like the trailer, even like when they were announcing it, was really compelling. So
yeah, yeah, but a thing that people kind of criticize that I think is worth criticizing is that specifically the game includes the Iron Giant, who is a beloved character from the film The Iron Giant, and the idea of that movie is that he was this big alien robot that fell to Earth and was meant to like be a mega weapon, but over time, through his interactions with a young boy named Hogarth, which is the best name of all time, learned and grew and was like, wait, I'm not a weapon. I don't have to be a weapon. I can be something else. I can be something better. Um,
oh, you're describing the plot of Ratchet and Clank,
yeah,
the
well,
new one.
it could be the plot of a lot of things. The story was just told in a very moving way, and the purpose of this character was to be about like nonviolence, and
Hmm.
ultimately like I guess finding a way to change your own destiny to become something that you weren't designed to be, something arguably better.
Hmm.
And then you have him in this game as just like a combatant, and like there's a trailer that they put out that like makes a reference to like the fact like his big heartfelt sacrifice in the movie. Also, one moment. Sorry, I am recovering from a cold, and it is causing me some mild discomfort.
It's
Anyway,
dubious why you're still here. Okay, anyway, go ahead.
well, I'm gonna wrap things up soon, so then I won't be here, and won't everyone else be sorry? But anyway, yeah. So you had this like they took this very nuanced character and turned him into the exact thing he's not supposed to be, like a weapon, a gun. And so people have like criticized that, and I think it does draw attention to the fact that like you have all these games now that are mashing up all of these characters and properties, and what you get out of that is on one hand like fun crossovers, but on the other hand, you get these like deviations from what these characters are even meant to be about. Like you can no longer tell the sort of interesting stories that you were trying to tell with them. Instead, you get, I think, as Luke from Kotaku, or not Luke, Zach from Kotaku put it, like gray entertainment goop, where it's just yeah.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me. I don't know if I can talk about this, but but when I was doing like HR training videos at CNN, they actually used Warner Bros. Characters in them, and then they have like Aquaman and stuff like being like, you should make sure you change your password and whatever. And I'm like, well, I don't think Aquaman would say that ever. It's just interesting to like reuse the same characters, put them in a different context, and then it just doesn't really fit. It's like almost writing fan fiction for those characters.
Yeah, it very much is. And in fact, that's exactly what they do in this case. So on the website for the game, they basically say like, okay, so first of all, this is an alternate universe, which is already like such a get out of jail free card. And then they're like, but also in this case, like Iron Giant learned to fight from Superman, and Superman uses his power to protect people. So like, it actually makes sense in that way. And it's like, man, I guess, like, I don't know, that's still like a fundamentally less interesting version of the story of the Iron Giant than the movie The Iron Giant. But it's just like, when we're doing this whole thing of mashing up all of these characters and series and franchises in the name of like a big crossover event that like gets a lot of eyeballs but maybe doesn't necessarily contain much substance, where do we end up except for with this kind of like, again, entertainment gravy that doesn't really say very much and maybe undercuts the messages of some of the things that the characters were originally in. And then ultimately, is that like what the metaverse is going to be too?
I think this is a really funny like galaxy brain perspective, especially if you think about like do we do this to Pokemon Unite? Like Pokemon Unite took all the Pokemon, put them everywhere, and like are fighting each other. Do you think like, oh, I'm betraying the lore of Gengar because he's out here shooting hoops? I don't think he had hoops back in the original.
That is such a different situation though. For one, that's all one series. That's just Pokemon. And for two, like Gengar was not a character specifically designed to tell one heartbreaking tale and then like not any others, because spoilers for a 1999 movie, the Iron Giant dies at the end. Like,
wow, you just spoiled the entire audience. They'll never come back now.
Wow. Yeah. Sorry, everybody. Anyway, I think that you are comparing apples to oranges, but you're dressing up the apples to look like they could be compared to the oranges. You've colored them orange, but it's not the case.
I mean, it's okay, great. I mean, if you want to say that, but like Super Smash as well, if you want to compare this to Super Smash, okay, maybe another comparison. You're gonna say like, oh, poor Kirby has lost his.
Yeah.
Anyway, you just keep continuing this.
Well, no,
this, yeah.
Okay, to your point. I mean, I'm not saying that like all mashups should go away forever. More what I think I'm saying is that if everything is doing this, because that is sort of the direction we're moving in. That's where you get. I think that that's like what Marvel is, and that's what like this obviously is. There have been multiple other fighting games that have attempted to do this. There's things like Ready Player One. There's the metaverse in general is this idea. There's Fortnite, where they keep bringing in characters that don't really fit very well. There's actually this other thing that I could jump to right now. PUBG Mobile is doing a Neon Genesis Evangelion crossover where Unit 1, which contains the soul of Shinji's dead mom and like does heinous acts and is a symbol of so many different cruelties visited upon humanity, and Shinji as a character is doing fun little dances. Like, it's just all so incongruous with itself. And so if everyone's doing this, where do we end up? And then like add to the fact that it means that we're just reusing the same characters and IPs over and over and over instead of telling original stories. And it's like, I don't know that I love what that future looks like.
Okay. I guess you haven't played VR Chat, where you could be literally any character anywhere. You could be a pack of dogs. You could be a giant Sasuke just marching around. I don't know. I mean, it can be fun to be a bunch of different avatars and then not have a single coherent story. And I think PUBG just continues to do more and more crossovers like this because, like, I mean, they did one with
they're
League
copying Fortnite, right?
as well. Yeah, no, they did one with League too, where like they even had League's characters, which was previously unheard of to have like League of Legends characters inside of PUBG. But now it's not even like worth batting an eyelash over because like it's just so common.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I'm curious as to whether people will get tired of this with time, because I do think it has diminishing returns. I think if a few things do it, then it's like, oh my God, all these characters that I know from different series in one place. This is crazy. But if everyone does it, then it's like, okay, I've been there. I've seen that. I've seen this character in other games. Yeah, whatever. And so, like, if there's not substance underlying it, I think eventually people will get tired of it. But we'll also see. I mean, if it's an easy way for companies to make money, they'll keep doing it. But also, the more important thing you mentioned is you mentioned VR chat, and you're like, oh, I guess you've never seen that. I guess you probably hate that. Actually, I don't. And in fact, our final story for this week is this incredible documentary, or I guess news piece. I don't know what you would even call it, that People Make Games did on VR chat, and how VR chat is this fascinating
Wait,
instance of a
I swear,
metaverse.
this live stream is not scripted. I had no idea you were gonna
I
pick VR
know,
chat as
I
the
know.
final. Like what?
Yeah. And
That's
as soon as you brought up VR chat, I was like, yes, yes,
that's
yes.
wild.
Yeah.
Great. Cool.
So yeah, I want to end this week's stream not on something stupid, but on kind of more of a recommendation, because this is a really long video. So People Make Games did this mini doc / piece of investigative journalism into VR chat and kind of its broader community, and it is an excellent video. It's so good. And kind of goes into all these different elements of the community surrounding VR chat, and how it's this like anti-metaverse where instead of, being tied into all these corporate interests, it's free of them. I mean, it's full of like copyright infringement, but that's because
Yep.
characters decided to make all of these different avatars. So you have all these different characters from different universes interacting, but in these ways that are like not, corporately clean, because there's like tons of, people like having sex and things like that. But there's also people like creating all these experimental spaces, all these really idyllic spaces. There's a whole group of people. Let's see if I can like scrub to this part, dedicated to resurrecting Kmart, so people can hang out there. And then like, let's see, I can't find that part. It's really cool and funny.
excellent. It's an
Oh, here
excellent
we go.
game. I mean, people are talking in voice chat too, so you can hear them, but they're like sound nothing like their avatar, and they're like,
Yep.
"Hey, I'm a dog. Want to join me? Be a pack of wolves? Be a pack of wolves."
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Yeah, no, here's the Kmart snippet. I'm gonna roll that one because it's just like
Majesty
indicative
of
to me.
people's custom avatars. VR chat is such a cornucopia of creativity that it makes you wonder if Facebook is entirely correct when they say that what people really need to create is monetization and them taking a 45% cut of every transaction. One community that immediately stood out to me were the VR chat users with the ongoing project of replicating a particular branch of ailing US big box store Kmart from 1992 while role-playing as its staff.
For those who, are shopping in America, a lot of people remember Kmart as one of their childhood stores. So it's pretty much your got everything store: groceries, electronics, home decor, sporting goods.
It's amazing.
Got it all. You can find a brand new outfit for the dance.
I don't know if you
while
remember
picking up a
this.
hunting rifle. This is kind of like
But
a
I
staple
think-
of a lot of retro stores. People will go to
Didn't
Fear
like a
and
Trump
Kmart
rally
to
get
go to the
recreated
Fortune
in
Studio.
VR chat one time?
So you can.
I
And it
mean,
was
that
a bunch
wouldn't
of
shock
furries.
me.
I think it was a bunch
And
of furries, and it was
then if you
BuzzFeed who
click
wrote the
mirror,
article.
you
I think
get
it was
your
VR
own
chat.
high
I
school
want to say.
style photo. In the beginning, it was
Oh,
just
yeah, this
me,
part's really interesting.
me and a friend that were working on it, and then the community.
Yeah, there's a
grew
whole
alongside
community
it.
for this
So it's been a
digital
constant work
recreation of
over
a
the past
1992
2.5
Kmart.
years now.
What we find is that Kmart tends to draw people that don't really feel like they fit in elsewhere. So
Right.
we have a
No,
very,
you laugh,
very
but-
broad autism spectrum community. We have a very broad mental health community,
Mhm.
LGBT. We have people who choose to be mute in the game for whatever reason due to anxiety. It's a place you can rely on. Anytime one of our people need help, they can reach out to us, and
Yeah.
we're always there to help them through things.
Oh my god.
This was
It's
something I
so
hear over and
strange
over
yet
again that really
fascinating.
surprised me.
And then like this video also goes into a whole bunch of other like elements of like, especially how the game blurs gender lines, because as you were talking about earlier, a lot of people like wear avatars that are not like them, and a lot of them are like men, but they're like anime girls. And so some
Yeah.
of them realize like, oh, I'm trans, or I'm bi, or like all these other things through playing the game. And then others, like one of the most interesting things that somebody in an interview said is like, they're like, I'm not any of those things, but I have realized in being this avatar that like I enjoy being cute. I like to be cute in a way that like I didn't know I was allowed to, and
Yeah.
this world has let me.
Yeah, a lot of guys like to play cute female characters in games. Not VR chat is one example, but like I play a lot of Maple Story. I mean, most maybe not most, but a lot of a lot of the women characters in MapleStory are actually played by dudes, and they're like,
Mm.
I'm not bi or gay or whatever. I just like this because it's cute. And I can get all these clothes that I
Yeah.
couldn't get otherwise.
Yeah. No, but anyway, this is a super fascinating thing that made me immediately be like, yeah, there might be something to the idea of a metaverse, albeit one that like is controlled by people as opposed to corporate interests. Because, you know, if you look at like what Facebook is trying to do with like their Horizon metaverse or whatever, it is the polar opposite of this. It is scrubbed clean of everything. That includes any recognizable like characters. And then like as this video points out, it is so like meant to be like entirely unsexy that they've even gotten rid of the lower half of people.
Yeah, they don't have
Because they're so
legs.
worried about that.
They don't have legs, but also like the metaverse as a word has not like lost all meaning. I keep
Mhm.
interviewing people about it, and like it's. I even talked to somebody who worked for a Second Life before, and it's
Mhm.
like you can argue that I don't know the metaverse existed so many years ago, like in VR chat and other games, and like at this point it doesn't mean anything. So I'm kind of over talking about it, but it's a cool platform. I thought you didn't. I love that I preemptively guessed your last link. That's never
And
happened before. I'm just basking in the glory. So
yeah, good job. You should be proud.
thanks.
Anyway, this has been our show for the week. I think we are signing off now. We do this every week at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursdays. So we'll be
1
back next
p.m.
week as well. Oh yeah,
That's
I
1
guess.
p.m. Pacific, and yeah, we're here every week.
Mhm.
So many games. So there's so much news, so much gaming news. Next Monday is the vote.
Oh yeah.
Raven Software, which makes Call of Duty games, is part of Activision Blizzard. There are
Mhm.
a group of quality assurance testers who are going to vote on if they can unionize. And yeah, that'll be on Monday. I'll cover it, and we'll probably talk about it on Thursday. I'm just
Yep.
guessing.
Yep. And then I don't know if we have a gameplay stream tomorrow. I should really ask. I've never known. We've not done a single show where I've known.
It is
Um,
okay. Probably, maybe. Okay, cool.
yeah. Well, in any case, tune in. If you get a notification that we're going live on any day, just tune in. Doesn't matter. Until then, we will see you next time.
Bye. Can you just continuously play this guy's video without getting in trouble?
I mean, I think we're